Here begins videotape number 1 in the deposition of Caroline Stell in the matter of Kevin Tolson versus St. Agnes Healthcare Incorporated et al. In the Circuit Court for Baltimore City, case number 24C-120-08071. Today's date is August 9th, 2013. The time on the video monitor is 2:05 p.m. and the video operator today is Akeem Graham. This video deposition is taking place at 7 St. Paul Street in Baltimore, Maryland. Counsel, please voice identify yourselves and state whom you represent.
Rodney M. Gaston, and I represent the plaintiff, Kevin Tolson.
Robert H. Bounce Jr. on behalf of Charles Krupa and Dr. Prudence Jackson.
Mary Pat McGuire on behalf of St. Agnes Healthcare, Inc. and Caroline Stell, RN.
The court reporter today is Trish Mitchell of Merrill Ladd. Would the reporter please swear in the witness?
Would you raise your right hand? Do you solemnly swear under the penalties of perjury the testimony you give will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Ma'am, could I please have your name and home address and business address, please?
Caroline Stell, Maryland, 21229.
Okay. Ms. Stell, my name is Rod E. Gaston. I represent Kevin Tolson in an action that's currently pending in the Circuit Court for Baltimore City. The action involves a claim of medical malpractice arising out of the medical care and treatment Mr. Tolson received at St. Agnes Hospital Emergency Room on December the 3rd, 2009. Have you ever had your deposition taken before?
No, sir.
I'm going to go over some of the ground rules so we can get through this and so that we can have an accurate record of what transpires today. The matter is being videotaped, and also there's a court reporter here seated to your right. The court reporter is required to take down all of my questions and all of your answers. She can't take down both of us talking at the same time. So I ask if you could just wait until I finish asking my question before you answer the question, and I'll try not to interrupt you while you're answering. Also, all the responses have to be verbal. We can't take a shake of the head or a nah or uh-huh or uh-uh. I just ask that all of your responses be verbal. Also, if any time during the deposition I ask you a question that you don't understand, you need to stop me immediately and just say, I don't understand what you're asking me. And I'll try to rephrase the question and ask it in a manner so you do understand. Because otherwise, if you don't do that, we will assume that you understood the question and you've answered the question truthfully. Have you understood everything I said so far?
Yes, sir.
If you need to take a break at any time, just let me know.
Okay.
Ma'am, your lawyer can assist you with answering the next question. It has to do with the notice of your deposition that I sent to your attorney. Attached to that notice was a list of 27 items that I asked for you to produce here today. And either you can answer the question or your lawyer could assist you. Do you have any of those items for me today?
I'll answer it if that's all right with you, Mr. Gaston. She does not. Ms. Stell doesn't have any records responsive to the notice of deposition. She does have and has seen a copy of the medical record from December 3, 2009 from St. Agnes, but I provided that to her.
Okay.
She does not keep that record as part of her records.
Okay. Do you have a CV, a resume?
No, sir.
Okay. And also, I'm particularly interested in any what we call demonstrative evidence, which would be exhibits and other items pertaining to the issues in this case, and those that are relied upon and to be relied upon by any expert witnesses, because we'll be taking the expert witness deposition in a few weeks, and I want to be sure that I have any of those items before I depose the expert. So what I'm asking for, do you have any of the items now in response to that request?
I do not. Those will certainly be produced as they become available or we determine what we're going to use.
And I'd ask that they be produced in advance of any expert witness deposition.
If there is something in advance, I will certainly do that.
Thank you very much. Okay. Ma'am, can you tell me a little bit about your education?
I went to nursing school at Howard Community College and graduated in 2002. And then I went on to get my bachelor's degree from University of Maryland in 2004.
Is the baccalaureate degree also within the field of nursing?
My bachelor's in nursing.
Okay. And I presume are you a licensed practical nurse or a registered nurse?
I'm a registered nurse.
And how long have you been a registered nurse in the state of Maryland?
Since 2002, May of 2002.
And have you continuously held a license from the state of Maryland to practice nursing medicine in the state of Maryland since 2002?
Correct.
Are you licensed to practice nursing medicine in any other state?
Objection to the characterization of nursing medicine.
Well, but what I'm saying is, do you understand what I'm saying? To be a nurse is what I'm talking about. I call it nursing medicine.
Well, nursing medicine isn't accurate. It's
What
nursing.
word would you like me to? What word would you like me to use? Nursing. Okay.
There's a major distinction there.
We'll use nursing. Are you licensed in the field of nursing from any other state?
Yes, sir. In California and Florida.
California. All right. When did you become licensed in the field of nursing in the state of California?
2006, I believe.
Is that license currently valid?
It is not.
Inactive?
It's inactive, correct.
Okay. And how about in the state of Florida?
I believe that year was 2009 or 10, and that is currently active.
Okay. Can you tell me a little bit about where you lived since you obtained your bachelor's degree of nursing from the University of Maryland in 2004 up to today's date?
My current address.
Okay. And is there a reason why you obtained licenses in California and in Florida in the field of nursing?
I did a travel contract in San Diego. Again, I believe it was 2006 or 7, I believe, for a few months.
What company was that with?
Cross Country Travel Corp.
And were you a employee or independent contractor for that group?
I was an employee.
Employee. All right, and how long were you employed by Cross Country Travel?
Approximately 3 months.
3 months. Okay.
I'm currently still employed. I just have not done another contract.
Okay. How does that work? If they have a job assignment for you, they call you, and then do you travel to different states?
If I want to go somewhere, I just call them.
Okay. Is that how you got your assignment in the state of Florida as well?
I have not done an assignment in Florida.
Okay. And did you move to Florida or just simply go down there to take the exam?
There was no exam.
No exam? Ew. How did you get licensed in Florida if there was no exam?
You only take an exam once for nursing, and you apply for a license.
Okay. Now, tell me about your employment with St. Agnes Hospital.
I've been there since December of 1999.
As a registered nurse?
I was a nursing technician from 99 until I graduated in 2002.
Was that a surgical nurse tech or a nurse technician on the floor?
I was a nursing technician on the floor in the emergency room.
Has all of your nursing work experience been in the field of emergency care through an emergency room?
Correct.
Okay. And so that would be from 1999 till today's date?
Correct.
And have you been continuously employed in one way or the other since 1999 to today's date?
Correct.
Okay. All right. And what was the length of time that you were away from St. Agnes? I know we have a 3-month period in California. Was that the only time?
Correct. I took a leave of absence to go to California.
Okay. And at the time of this incident, December 3rd, 2009, you were employed as a regular employee with St. Agnes Hospital?
Correct. I've been employed by St. Agnes since 1999.
That's right, you did tell me that. Thank you very much. Okay. All right, now, has your duties in the emergency room at St. Agnes Hospital changed since 1999 up to the time of this incident in December of 2009?
I graduated from nursing school in 2002, so that's when my duties changed as an RN.
I mean, okay, very well. Since you became an RN and worked in the emergency room at St. Agnes Hospital, from 2002 to 2009, have your duties changed?
I'm going to object to relevance, but you can.
I would say they've changed due to my experience increasing. Through the years, I've started teaching within the ER.
Okay, and who do you teach in the ER?
New employees, current employees.
Would these be nurses?
Correct.
Okay.
And nursing technicians.
Do you have a title at the hospital?
Just an RN.
RN? Okay. Is there any other RNs in the hospital who take on similar teaching responsibilities that you take on for new employees and new nurses?
Correct.
Okay. So and how many nurses work in the emergency room at St. Agnes Hospital at any one shift? And I know there's two parts of the ER, a main ER and urgent care.
There's multiple parts of the ER.
Okay, why don't you tell me all the parts?
Okay, there's a triage, there's urgent care, pediatric, chest pain, and the main ER.
Is pediatric/chest pain one unit?
No, they're all separate entities.
Okay. Triage, urgent care, pediatric, chest pain, and the main ER.
Correct.
How many of those units have you worked in?
All of them.
Okay. So you're familiar with the hospital rules, procedures, and protocols that apply to nurses such as yourself when you work in any one of those divisions of the emergency room?
I'm going to object to the breadth of the question, but if you understand it, you can answer.
I'm aware that there are policies. Could I rephrase, or could I state them? No, sir.
Okay. But you're aware of them, and would it be fair to say that you do follow them in your everyday nursing practice?
Correct.
Okay. Now, did you ever do triage?
Yes.
Okay. And do you know if you performed the triage on Mr. Tolson in this case? And what I do, ma'am, I'm going to give you a copy which is marked as actually Shaw Exhibit 2, which is a copy of Mr. Tolson's records. It's missing one page, and I'll get to that in a minute. But if you can, first off, before we go there, do you have any recollection of Mr. Tolson at all?
I do not.
Okay. So all of your testimony here today would have to be from from reading the emergency room records. Would that be correct?
Correct.
Objection, in addition to custom, habit, or routine practice. Yes. With that included, yes.
Well, hang on a second. You have no independent recollection of Mr. Tolson, correct?
I do not remember his visit, no.
Okay. All right. Now, from the chart that's before you, can we go through each page, if you would? We'll start out with page 2. Is that a triage page that's filled out by a triage nurse?
Correct.
And have you used this form when you perform triage services at St. Agnes Hospital?
Yes.
Okay. And do you know the nurse that signed this form?
Yes.
Okay. And what is her name?
Sharon Beshy, now Craddock.
Is she still employed at St. Agnes Hospital?
Yes, sir.
Co-worker of yours?
Yes, sir.
Would you say you're friends with Sharon?
Co-worker, sir.
Co-worker? Okay, all right. And when when this form is filled out, there is a note on the right-hand side of positive for deformity. Is that an evaluation that the triage nurse performs and then writes her findings or his findings down on that form?
Yes.
Okay. Unable to move foot, Can you tell or not from this form whether that's from the nurse trying to move the patient's left foot or from the patient simply saying he or she can't move the left foot?
I can't say exactly what she was meant, but I would understand that as the patient could not move left foot.
Okay, and positive for pedal pulses, what's your interpretation of that, if you have one?
The patient had distal pulses on that left foot.
Okay. Now, and this nurse made an indication that it was a level 4 triage case, correct?
Correct.
And it was to go to the urgent care division of the emergency room.
Correct.
Okay. Do you know the difference between a level 3 and a level 4 triage assessment?
Yes, sir.
Can you tell me basically what the differences is?
A level 4 would indicate that the patient has a minor injury and that the patient may only require one intervention.
And when you mean by one intervention, is that one form of treatment?
It means one intervention, meaning one X-ray.
And no other diagnostic? Is an intervention a diagnostic study or another type of test?
Testing.
Testing, okay. And how many different testings are available at the hospital, just by way of example?
Objection.
You mean all levels?
No, is the EKG an intervention?
Correct.
EKG an intervention? Yes?
Yes,
You have to?
I said correct.
Yeah, thank you. And a Doppler study, would that be an intervention?
Correct.
Would an MRI be an intervention?
Correct.
CT be an intervention?
Correct. There's hundreds of
Okay,
interventions.
hundreds. So level 4 is the nurse made a determination it would be one intervention in this case?
Correct.
Okay. If it were 2, would it be a level 3?
Correct.
And how about to get from a level 3 to a level 2?
Level 3 could mean multiple interventions. A level 2 is multiple interventions, and severity is life-threatening. Like the severity of the patient is life-threatening.
Does it have to be life-threatening, or could it also encompass a limb-threatening injury?
Correct. Any threatening injury
Okay.
or medical problem.
Yeah, I want to show you a form. Are there different forms that are used by nurses and doctors depending upon which portion of the emergency room the patient's sent to, which division within the emergency room?
And Mr. Gaston, I know the answer to this, but I don't think it's been put on the record from Ms. Stell's deposition. For all these questions we're talking about in December of 2009.
Yeah, anytime I ask you a question, it always goes back to December of 2009.
Okay.
So let's go all the way back there.
Okay.
Would it be fair to say that you are familiar with all of the emergency room forms that were used by the staff at the hospital, whether it be triage, pediatric, urgent care, or main hospital? main door?
Nursing?
I'm sorry, did I say nursing?
No.
No.
Okay.
But yes, I am aware of all the paperwork in the ER.
Okay, that's what I was going to say.
For
Now, I'm going to show you.
nurses.
Right. I'm going to show you what's been marked as page number 3 out of the records. And this is what was contained in Mr. Tolson's chart that was provided to me. Can you identify that document?
This is the nursing documentation form.
Okay, and when is that form usually used?
When a patient, when the nurse needs to document on the patient.
So for any time the nurse would have to document any of the conditions from Mr. Tolson that would appear on this page, a nurse, if they're in the urgent care, would be using this form?
This page is not required for urgent care.
Okay. What is this page required for?
It is required for more higher level patients with multi-system issues. It's also can be used when there is a deviation from normal or otherwise documented in the triage.
Okay, is this form used for a level 2 triage patient?
It can be, yes.
Okay, how about a level 3 triage patient?
It can be, yes.
And how about a level 4 triage patient?
It can be, yes.
Okay, so it's up to the individual nurse's discretion as to whether or not this form is used?
Whether it's needed.
Okay, and that can vary from nurse to nurse?
Objection. Go ahead.
No, it varies from patient to patient.
From patient to patient, okay. So if a patient presents with a condition that can be listed on this form, is this one of the forms that the nurses use in the urgent care division?
Objection to foundation and to form.
Can you repeat the question?
Sure. If a patient presents with a condition or complaints that are contained on this form that we have here, and particularly in this case with Mr. Tolson, can a nurse use that form to document the patient's condition, the evaluation, and the findings?
Objection to foundation. And do you have a paper copy of that in front of you, at least? Here. I didn't realize you weren't seeing this stuff. So
No, it's
this
right
is-
there, ma'am.
This is the form he's
Okay.
discussing.
Why don't you go ahead and take a look at that form?
So, can you repeat the question again, now that I'm seeing the paper, please?
Sure. If whoever the nurse or physician's assistant or doctor was examining Mr. Tolson, and he presented with conditions or symptoms that can be evaluated by the use of this form, is this one of the forms that the nurse, physician assistant, or doctor could use in this case?
Objection to foundation. You can answer.
No, a doctor would not document on this form. And as far as condition, I wouldn't say that based on a condition would we use this form. We would
Yes.
base using this form on the patient's assessment.
Okay, maybe I confuse condition with assessment. So if a nurse conducts an assessment of the patient and there are positive findings that would fit on this form, can she use or he use this form to note those findings?
Correct.
Okay. Now, did you write the X on this form?
I did.
Okay. Why didn't you use this form in this case?
Because it was not found necessary due to my assessment. There was no deviation from the triage assessment, so no additional documentation was needed.
Okay. So there would have to be a deviation from the triage assessment, meaning raising the level of triage from a 4 to a 3 before this form would be used by you on this date.
Objection is characterized as the testimony and to foundation.
If you're
You can
going
answer.
to make a speaking objection, I'll have to ask the witness to leave. But the objection is noted. Can you answer the question?
Objection to foundation. You can answer if you can.
So can you repeat the question?
I'll ask the court reporter to repeat it for us.
So there would have to be a deviation from the triage assessment, meaning raising a level of triage from a 4 to a 3 before this form would be used by you on this date?
That is incorrect.
Okay.
I would use this form if there was a change in the initial assessment, but that excludes the changing of the severity, or excuse me, changing the acuity level of the patient. That, just because the patient's acuity level is changed does not mean, has nothing to do with this form.
Okay.
It has to do with the assessment.
And the acuity level, are you referring to the triage level?
Correct.
Okay, so it has to be changed from the initial assessment.
Objection
So-
to characterization.
Is that what you said? It would have to be a change from the initial assessment made by the triage nurse in order for you to then use this form to assess Mr. Tolson's case.
Correct.
Okay, that's what I thought you said. Now, what would have to change from the initial assessment? The initial assessment was deformity unable to move left foot with positive pedal pulses. If Mr. Tolson had numbness in his leg or foot, would that change? Would that be a change in the initial assessment?
Correct.
Okay. Would that change be enough for you to then use this form?
I'm going to object to the foundation, but you can answer.
Possibly yes, or I would write a narrative note.
Okay. I'm trying to figure out under those circumstances where you would write a narrative note versus using the form. Is there a criteria that you use?
No, sir.
Okay. Just whatever you decided to do at that point.
Correct.
Okay. If there was a claim I'm sorry, are you familiar with the term paresthesia?
Yes.
What's your understanding of that medical term?
That there is a change in the feeling, the movement, the neuro assessment.
Okay. If Mr. Tolson reported paresthesia, would that be a change from the initial assessment that would warrant the use of this form by you?
Yes.
Can we go to page 4?
I'm going to take my packets. These aren't labeled.
At the bottom of the page, there should be a number, ma'am.
Okay.
Are we there? Okay.
Yes.
All right. We are now at page 4 of the record. Can you tell me if any of your handwriting appears on that page?
Wait a minute.
Okay.
I think she's looking at a different.
So I'm on page 4 of our documentation, of the St. Agnes documentation. There is no numbers on your paper.
Just a moment. Hey, ma'am, right here on page 4. We're on the
I'm
exact
sorry.
same, that's okay, we're on the exact same page.
Okay.
It's 0004 at the bottom. Okay, so now we're at page 4 of the exhibit that's before you. Can you tell me if your handwriting appears on that page at all?
Yes, sir.
Okay, first, what is page 4? What type of a form is this?
I can't say, it's part of the nursing documentation.
It's a form that you're familiar with?
Correct.
Okay, and at what point in Mr. Tolson's examination or evaluation is this form filled out? Is it before any assessment, after the assessment?
I would say that this is, I could label this as an intervention page. This is where any intervention that was done for the patient would be documented.
Okay, so this could have been filled out after the x-rays were taken? Would that be correct?
Correct, or at the time of initiation.
Okay. We have a date at the bottom. It says 12/3. We have a time of 15:25. Is that 25 minutes after 3 in the afternoon?
Yes.
And is that your initials, where it looks like a circle with an X in it?
No, sir.
Okay. Do you know who made that note in the chart?
Anita Weiss.
And who is Anita Weiss?
A coworker, RN.
Can you tell me what role, from looking at this document, Anita Weiss had in the case?
On this page, it
Yes, ma'am.
states that she put in a IV in the patient.
And did the IV go in at 15:25 hours?
Correct.
Can you tell me from looking at the rest of the chart, if you reviewed the chart, what would be the purpose for that IV? And I will let you know, this isn't a trick question, but there is a note on page 16. There was the lauded 1 milligram IV that was ordered for Mr. Tolson.
Well, there was 2 IV medicines ordered for Mr. Tolson,
Okay?
and that IV would have been placed for that reason.
Okay. And are both the IV medicines, the Dilaudid 1 milligram and the Toradol?
30 milligrams,
30
correct.
milligrams. Okay. So, and it looks like from page 16, we have an order of Dilaudid 1 milligram by IV and Toradol by IV made at 15:27 hours. Would that be 27 minutes after 3 o'clock in the afternoon?
Objection.
You can answer.
Oh,
Look at the page.
I have it. It does not state that that's when the medicine was ordered, no.
Okay. What does the time 15:27 next to time mean if it's not the time that the medicine was ordered?
That means that's the time that the medicine Dilaudid was given.
Oh, it was given. Okay, thank you. All right, so presumably, it'd have to be ordered a few minutes before it was given.
Correct.
Or at the same time?
Same time, correct.
Okay, all right. So your interpretation of the record that Mr. Tolson actually received the IV of Dilaudid and Toradol at 15:27 hours, which would be 27 minutes after 3 o'clock p.m. on December 3rd, 2009. Would that be an accurate statement?
No. Looking further into the record, the Dilaudid 1 milligram IV was, yes, given at 15:27. But looking at the medicine administration form on the nursing documentation states that the Toradol was given at a later time.
Okay, what page do you have, if you could?
On page 5 would be more of a detailed time when the medicines were given.
Okay. It looks like, as you said, Dilaudid given 15:30?
That's when it was documented.
Okay, and you're relying upon that documentation to give an opinion that that's the time it was actually administered?
Correct.
And that's why you say with the Toradol was given later, which would be 16:50, which would be 4:50 p.m.
Correct.
Now, can you tell from the record who actually gave that medicine to Mr. Tolson?
It appears, per the record, that Dilaudid 1 milligram was given by Anita Weiss and co-signed by me because it was a narcotic. And then the Toradol was given at 16:50 by myself.
Okay, now when you say co-sign, did you have to witness Ms. Weiss actually hanging the IV of Dilaudid, or can she hang it and let you know about it and you sign off on it?
Objection to form. You can answer.
It is a co-sign that it was given to the patient, that I saw the patient receive the medicine.
Okay. All right. That means by 15:30 hours, you had actually physically seen Mr. Tolson in the emergency room?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. All right. And back to page 4, if we could. All right. Where it says signature, comfort measures 12-3, patient education instructions, are those your initials on that page?
Correct.
Okay. Do you know what comfort measures meant?
It means explaining to the patient, comforting him, giving him blankets, giving him ice packs.
Okay. And how about patient education instructions?
That plan of care means that I'm explaining what the process in the ER is going to consist of, explaining the care that he's receiving, explaining the IV being placed, x-rays being done, and so forth.
I don't want to make this too general, but were you Mr. Tolson's nurse from the time he was triaged, right after he was triaged, to the time he was discharged?
I can say that I was taking care of Mr. Tolson at that time due to the charting, yes. Was there other nurses involved? Yes.
Were you, for the lack of a better word, his primary nurse on that day?
I would not say that because there was other nurses involved. In urgent care, it was team nursing.
Okay. Can you tell me what other nurses were involved and what role they had in Mr. Tolson's care from the chart?
Anita Weiss and I were the two nurses taking care of the patient.
Okay. Was she a RN or LPN?
RN.
RN. And were you more senior to her or on the same level?
On the same level.
Same level. And you said you had to witness the administration. Is that a policy that whenever a narcotic drug is administered to the patient, that there has to be 2 nurses who witness the administration?
Correct.
Objection to the characterization.
All right. Let's go to page 7 if we could. I know this may be not in the right chronological order, but we're just going to go by numbers, the page number, if you would. Page 7, is your handwriting on that page?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Did you make all of the notations on that page?
No, sir.
Okay. Tell me which notations, if we can start from the discharge box, if you could tell me which notations you made on the page.
Everything in the discharge box is my writing.
Okay. Where it says pain 0 to 1, is that your initial?
No, that's a 0.
That's a 0. Okay. Because pain at the time of discharge was 0?
Correct.
Do you interpret that to mean that the Dilaudid had worked?
I interpret that to...
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
I interpret that to mean that the interventions, pain medicine worked.
Okay. And is that the patient's self-reporting of the
Correct.
pain? Okay. All right. And in your experience, when a patient is given an IV of Dilaudid 1 milligram, can you tell me the approximate time that it takes in order for the medication to, for lack of a better word, work for the patient?
Objection. You can answer if you can.
Every patient is different. I've had patients within 1 minute of the medicine being given at work. I've had patients say it doesn't work. So it's very subjective.
Do you know in this case how long it took for the medication to work on Mr. Tolson?
I don't know.
Okay. If the medication hadn't worked and Mr. Tolson had requested additional pain medication, would that request, would you make a note of that request in the chart?
Correct.
And there's no additional request that I see in the chart of Mr. Tolson for additional pain medication, is there?
No.
Can we assume, more likely than not, that he did not make a request for additional pain medication after the 1 milligram of Dilaudid was administered?
Objection.
You can answer.
There was additional pain medicine given.
That was a Toradol.
Correct.
But it was ordered at the same time, but just given at a different time, correct?
Objection.
Incorrect.
Foundation.
Okay, I'm sorry. Let's go back to the Dilaudid. I think it was page 16. Okay. I'm sorry. Not ordered, but administered. It was administered. No, sorry. I don't want to misspeak. Was the Dilaudid and the Toradol, when it has a little caret to the right in the time 15:27, does that time apply to both of those medications?
Incorrect. No.
Okay. Which time does that apply to?
It applies to the Dilaudid being given, and it appears that the order for the Toradol was just written inside of that documentation afterwards.
Okay. All right, let's go back to page 5. I'm sorry. We were actually on page 7. Okay. So, and did you fill this form out at 17:25 hours on that day?
I can't give you the exact time that I filled it out, but I know the patient was discharged at 17:25.
Okay. Would this have been filled out on or close to that time?
Correct.
Okay. Pain was at 0. He was discharged from the hospital by a wheelchair, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And the instructions, I have home care, patient family, prescriptions, sick certificate, instructions, educational information, follow-up medication, crutches, knee immobilizer. And is that your printed initials and then your signed initials in that box?
No, sir.
Okay. The C Stell, is that your printed first initial and printed last name?
Correct.
Did you do that?
Yes, sir.
And did you initial?
That's C-Stel RN is my signature.
RN, thank you. What is DSE applied?
Dressing applied, meaning that the IV was DC'd.
Okay, and the signature box below, Can you read the word that's in that signature box?
It says Anita Weiss with her initials next to it.
And what does that represent?
Because her initials were in the chart, it just shows whose initials they are.
Okay. It doesn't mean that she did anything on this page for the
Correct.
treatment of, and you have to let me finish,
I'm
Ann.
sorry.
That's okay. It's normal that you anticipate the question. But the only reason that is in there is so if her initials appear in the chart, they can go back to this box and figure out it was Anita Weiss that made the initials in that chart.
Correct.
Okay. Now, page 8. Is any of your handwriting on that page?
No, sir.
Page 9, is any of your handwriting on that page?
No, sir.
Okay. Page 10, is any of your handwriting on that page?
No, sir.
Page 11, is any of your handwriting on that page?
No, sir.
Page 12, is any of your handwriting on that page?
No, sir.
Let's see, 13,
No.
about 14,
No.
15,
No.
16?
Yes.
Okay. 16, what part of this page did you fill out?
I filled out pain and swelling. I also filled out left ankle, tib, fib, knee, hip, and femur. And I also signed off CS 1527 is my handwriting.
Where it says the Dilaudid and the Toradol?
Right, the carrot, as you called it.
Yes, ma'am.
And the CS 1527 is my handwriting.
Okay, and who wrote the Dilaudid, the Toradol? Do you know who wrote those words?
I do not.
Okay, and why did you have to initial and put the time next to that medication?
That was the time that it was given, the medicine.
Okay, all right. Now, is there anywhere in this, first off, can you tell from this note whether you actually physically examined Mr. Tolson?
Yes, sir.
Okay, how do you know that and where does that appear?
It appears to me because I ordered the x-rays.
You ordered the x-rays and not the physician's assistant, would that be fair?
Correct.
Okay. And ordering the x-rays, is that something that a nurse, that's one of your normal jobs at the hospital?
Correct.
Okay, and so you do an assessment of the patient, and then, in your own judgment, if you believe the patient requires an x-ray, then you can order the x-ray?
Correct.
And can you tell from this chart what your evaluation of the patient revealed, if at all?
It revealed that the patient had pain and swelling, and that the patient needed x-rays of his left ankle, tib, fib, knee, hip, and femur.
Do you have to get authorization from the physician assistant or the ER doc before you call down to radiology and ask that the radiologist put Mr. Tolson in line to take x-rays?
Objection. Foundation.
Can you repeat the question?
Right. I think you said you have the authority to order x-rays in this case, correct?
Correct.
And that's part of your normal duties as a nurse in the urgent care division at St. Agnes Hospital.
Objection.
Is that correct?
I am able to, after my assessment of the patient, initiate x-rays to help with the flow of the ER.
Okay.
Once I assess the patient and feel the need of x-rays only, I am able to do so.
Okay. So you don't have to track down the physician assistant or the doc before you can get Mr. Tolson into the radiology department?
Correct.
All right. It helps to speed things along, right?
Correct.
Okay, I got it. All right, now, is there a reason why your evaluation of Mr. Tolson's leg is not a detailed evaluation, whatever you may have done, is not contained in the chart, other than on page 16, where you have pain/swelling?
My assessment is in the chart. What's not stated also says a lot about my assessment.
Okay, where, I'm sorry, is there any other page other than page 16 that represents your evaluation of Mr. Tolson's leg?
Yes.
Your own evaluation?
On the
Okay.
discharge papers that we just discussed shows that I did an assessment. My crossing out of the other previous page also shows that there was no deviation from the initial assessment. So that is also proof of an assessment.
Okay, hang on a second.
So page 4 is a, a description of my assessment.
Okay, where on page 4 is the description of your assessment?
So me writing that there was initiation of x-rays, left tib, fib, ankle, femur, hip, knee, was part of my assessment. The discharge was also part of my assessment, that there was no pain at discharge. So there
Okay.
was assessment
Okay.
all over.
But what I'm talking about, and is the assessment for an injury such a, how do you know what actually, can you tell me what actually you did?
I'm sorry.
That's
I have to
okay.
turn it off.
No problem.
I apologize.
You okay? Do you need to take that?
No, I'm sorry, I just forgot to turn it off.
That's all right.
Okay. Let me go back. I think the fact that you crossed out and made an X on page number 3 indicates there was no deviation from the initial assessment made by the triage nurse. Was that a fair statement?
That there was no deviation from the triage nurse, yes.
Okay. And the only assessment we have from the triage nurse, other than the vital signs, we're going to leave those aside for a second, was positive for deformity, unable to move left foot, and positive pedal pulses. Are those the initial assessments that you're referring to?
And the pain scale is an assessment, yes.
Okay. So, at the time of
And
the...
the neuro, alert and oriented,
Oh, it's at the top, is that...
times 3.
Times 3.
Means that there was a neuro assessment. There was no loss of consciousness.
Okay.
That's also an assessment.
Okay, all right. So, at the time of the discharge, would it be fair to say, in accordance with the triage nurse's initial assessment, that Mr. Tolson was still unable to move his left foot?
Please repeat the question?
Right. You said that the reason you didn't use form on page 3 is because there was no deviation from the initial assessments made by the triage nurse. One of those assessments was that he was unable to move his left foot. Would it be fair to say that at the time of discharge, Mr. Tolson was still unable to move his left foot?
Yes, that's possible.
Well, I want to know more than possible. Do you believe more likely than not that at the time of discharge, he was still unable to move his left foot?
Objection.
It's possible, yes.
Well, if it was different, then that would have been a change from the initial assessment, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And
Or a change from normal.
right. And would you have noted that somewhere in the chart?
Possibly, yes. I mean, if the patient was unable to move his left foot initially, that could have been due to pain. So, yes, when I document that the patient had no pain, there was no change from the initial assessment. So I would say yes, that it was possible that he was unable to move his foot.
In fact, it would probably be more likely than not, because if he was moving his foot, then that would have been a change from the initial assessment, and that would have been something that you would have made a note of because it's different. Would that be?
We
Objection.
Would
talking
that
about
be a fair
discharge?
statement?
Mr. Gaston, are we talking about just?
Well,
a discharge?
through her evaluation.
No,
Let me go
Still
back.
hasn't
Let
answered the
me go back.
question.
Hang on a minute. Let me go back. I'll ask a question again. The reason that you crossed out page 3 and didn't use page 3 to assess Mr. Tolson is because there was no change from the initial assessment made by the triage nurse. Is that a true statement?
Correct.
Now,
There also is that in my assessment of him, there was no more detailed information that I needed to document on this page.
okay. Now, and one of the assessments that the triage nurse wrote was he was unable to move his left foot, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And is that one of the assessments that you made of Mr. Tolson through your examination of him? Whether you-
Possibly, yes.
Okay. Because that was one of the initial assessments.
Correct.
Okay. Now, if there had been a change, if at the time of the discharge, Mr. Tolson had been able to move his foot all around and had range of motion in his foot, that would have been a change from the initial assessment, correct?
Correct.
And do you think that would have been something that you would have noted in the chart?
Possibly,
Objection.
yes.
Okay, because in accordance with the protocol that you follow, at the time of discharge, would you also have made a note of that because it's different from when he first came into the ER?
Objection to foundation, asked and answered.
Go ahead.
Possibly, yes.
And because it's not noted in the discharge summary, would you believe
That
that,
he had difficulty moving his left foot.
or couldn't move it?
I object.
Objection.
Is that true?
I can't answer that, I don't know.
Well,
I already said possibly, yes.
yeah, at the time of discharge,
Mm-hmm.
from this record, was he able to move his foot or not? Do you know?
I don't remember.
Okay. At the time of discharge, did he have numbness in his left foot?
No.
How do you, if you don't remember if he couldn't move his left foot, then how do you know his left foot wasn't still numb?
Because that's a neurovascular change, I would have documented that.
A change from what? A change from the initial assessment here?
Correct.
Well, on page 8, whoever filled out that page notes that he has numbness and paresthesia, correct?
This is not my documentation, I can't speak on what somebody else documented.
I'm not asking you to speak on it, I'm just asking you, in this file, does it indicate that Mr. Tolson had numbness and paresthesia on that page?
Objection to the characterization.
Yes. It's written there, yes.
Okay. If you don't remember the case, then would it be fair to say you certainly can't relate any communication or any words that were spoken between you and Mr. Tolson? Would that be fair?
Correct.
Nor can you relate any communications between you and any family member who was there with Mr. Tolson, correct?
Correct.
Do you remember if there was any family member with him?
I do not, sir.
Okay. Now, it looks like on page 16, somebody ordered a knee brace for Mr. Tolson. Would that be accurate?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and I think you said that's not your handwriting, correct?
Correct.
Okay, can you tell from those words what type of brace was used?
A knee immobilizer?
And can you, is there only one, or there two? Is there a general one that you use?
Just one.
Just one. And do you know the manufacturer?
I do not.
Can you describe it for me?
It is a brace that spans from the thigh, typically down to the calf or ankle, that immobilizes the range of motion of the left knee. or the knee, excuse me.
In this case, it was on his
The
left
left knee, yes.
Okay. All right. Is it something that wraps from the underside of the leg to the top?
Yes,
And are there Velcro strips that attach to the side that helps to keep the brace close to the skin?
correct.
Okay. And is there also a little hole for the kneecap to come through in the brace?
No.
Okay. If you can give me a little more description, I know we don't have a picture of it. Can you be a little more descriptive? if
So
you will?
there are two metal, encompassed in fabric, of course, two metal
Plates?
I guess, to keep the side that go on each side of the knee. It's fabric otherwise, and then the Velcro goes above the top of the leg to hold it in place.
Okay.
So it basically stops the range of motion of the knee, so that that joint is immobilized, essentially.
So the sides and the bottom are all together in one unit, and it's the top part across the top of the leg that there's a space where the Velcro has to go across?
Correct. It's fabric that wraps over,
Fabric over.
kind of like, I don't even know how to describe it, but it's fabric that goes over the leg. There's the two metal bars on the side to keep the leg in place. The Velcro goes over the whole top of the leg to secure the device.
Do you know whether Mr. Tolson was discharged with his soccer shoes on?
I do not remember.
And were you the discharge nurse that, I think we already know this, you did discharge Mr. Tolson from the
Correct.
hospital? Okay.
Estelle, if you could let him finish his question before you start to answer. It's a very natural thing, I understand, but I just want to remind you.
You're doing good.
Well, actually,
Grammatically doing well.
take that, Gaston.
All right. Do you have the ability to order MRIs?
No, sir.
Do you have the ability to order a CAT scan?
No, sir.
Do you have the ability to order a bedside Doppler study?
Describe what you mean by bedside Doppler study. There's different types of Doppler.
Okay. Well,
There is a,
Let him ask you what he's asking.
go ahead. You go ahead. Explain to me the different types so I'll know.
so when you say bedside Doppler, there is a machine that you can use to assess pulses.
Okay. Are you qualified in the use of that machine?
Yes, sir.
And have you used that machine on other patients?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So if you believed in the course of your assessment that Mr. Tolson required a bedside Doppler to measure pulses within his lead, you could have taken upon yourself to actually conduct that evaluation in the emergency room.
Yes, I would have.
Okay. Now, is there anywhere in the chart in writing where you denote that you checked for pulses?
No, sir, but I did check for pulses.
But that's only because that's what you believe you do on a routine basis, correct?
I do that in my practice with every patient that has this injury.
Okay. And what type of a pulse would you have to have in a patient such as Mr. Tolson before you would go to a bedside Doppler?
If I was unable to obtain the pulse, I would attempt it with the bedside Doppler.
Would it have to be a zero or no detection, or what if it was a weak pulse?
Please repeat the question.
Right. If you couldn't detect the pulse, that means there's none. But I'm
Correct.
wondering, is there a degree, a varying degree by which you could still use a bedside Doppler, if you wasn't sure he was getting adequate blood flow to his lower extremity?
Objection to foundation.
I would get the bedside Doppler if I did not feel a pulse.
If you also felt that he was not getting adequate blood supply to his lower extremity, would you also use the bedside Doppler?
Objection to foundation and scope.
Go ahead.
I would only get the Doppler if I did not feel a pulse.
Is there protocols at the hospital when a nurse can order a Doppler?
A nurse does not order a Doppler. It's just an assessment tool.
Oh, okay. Are the protocols at the hospital that inform a nurse under the circumstances when she or he can use a Doppler or should use a Doppler on the patient?
Objection.
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Sure. You said the only time you would use a bedside Doppler if you couldn't detect a pulse, correct?
Correct.
Now, are there any written protocols in the hospital?
Not that I'm
For-
aware.
Okay, it's okay.
Sorry.
That's all right. Try it again. Are there any written protocols in the hospital that a nurse can go to look at to determine the guidelines for when to use a bedside Doppler?
Not that I'm aware of.
And how did you then develop this guideline for yourself that you only use a Doppler if you can't detect a pulse? Is that something through nursing school, training? How did you develop that guideline for yourself?
Through my practice and training, sometimes you can't find or feel a pulse. It may be there, so you grab a Doppler to help assist you find that pulse.
Did you reassess Mr. Tolson's pulse before he was discharged?
I don't remember, but I know that in my practice, I assess the patient's neurovascular status by touching, feeling, looking.
But you can't tell in this case whether that was actually done. Would that be a fair statement?
Objection.
I just know in my practice that when discharging a patient, I do an assessment.
But in this case, you can't tell with any degree of certainty one way or the other whether that was actually done. Would that be a fair statement?
Objection. Asked and answered.
You can answer.
Again, I know in my practice that I do that at discharge. I can't say that it is documented, no.
And you can't say whether or not that was actually done in this case.
Objection.
No, I
Objection.
know
Asked
it.
and answered.
You know it was done in this case?
Correct.
For sure?
Correct.
Okay. When was it done? What time?
At discharge,
Okay. Who was present when this was done?
myself and the patient.
Okay. And what did you do physically?
I look at the patient's leg when discharging. I apparently put him in a wheelchair. So I touched the patient's leg, felt the color or felt the temperature, felt or assessed the color. That's just what I do in my practice.
And
I
this-
mean, that's what I do for these patients.
And this is a vascular assessment that's done post-splinting. Would that be correct?
It was done at discharge. I did not place the splint.
Okay. Who placed the splint?
It appears to on the documentation that the provider did.
And do you know who that provider was in this case?
According to the documentation, it was Dr. Krupa Shaw.
Okay. And did you do your assessment after the splint was placed on Mr. Tolson's leg?
Yes,
Okay. So normally in your practice, after the patient's leg splinted and before he's discharged, that's when you do your assessment.
correct.
Okay. Now, you don't take the brace off and reapply it, do you?
No, sir.
Okay. So once it's on, it stays on until he's out the door.
Correct.
All right. Can we go to page 19? Are you familiar with this box?
This is not part of the patient's record that we see in the ER, but yes, I can read it.
Okay. Where it says chief complaint priority is 3, do you know what the priority number 3 stands for, represents?
Not in this, no.
Okay. Where it says severity number 9, do you know what that means?
This is registration coding, so no, I don't know.
And do you know a doctor has to order the Dilaudid or a physician's assistant, correct?
Correct.
Is there anywhere in this chart to determine or ascertain if a physician's assistant or doctor examined Mr. Tolson before the medication was ordered?
I'm not sure.
Okay. And do you know time-wise, when is the first time that you actually had a hands-on assessment of Mr. Tolson?
I would say approximately around 15:27, 15:30 when the x-rays were ordered.
Okay. Because you don't remember this case, it would be fair to say you have no recollection, or you can't remember whether a physician's assistant from your own memory also saw Mr. Tolson, or whether an emergency room doctor also physically saw and examined Mr. Tolson. Would that be fair?
Objection. You can answer.
Based on the documentation, it appears that both. So,
But from your own record, from
No.
your own memory?
no, I don't remember.
Okay. And from the record, what time did the ER doctor see Mr. Tolson?
It appears from the record that the clinician was in at 1600 at 4 o'clock, or I'm sorry, yeah, at 4 p.m.
Okay. Does any of your handwriting, initials, or signatures appear on any other pages of the chart?
Other than what we have already discussed, no,
Right.
sir.
I'll bring your attention to page 28.
Okay, yes, sir, that's my signature.
Okay, and the diagnosis of sprains appears on, well, I don't know if that's a diagnosis or not. What it says is that the patient received the following patient instructions: sprains. Is there a printout at the hospital that has generally to do with sprains that's given to the patient?
Yes, sir, it's part of the discharge instructions.
Okay. And it looks like that was done at 5 o'clock on December the 3rd, 2009?
According to my signature, it was done at 17:25.
Okay. And do you know why the 5 o'clock number's there?
That is when it was printed by, or typed by the provider.
Okay. Do you interpret X-ray studies?
No, sir.
Is there anything else that you can remember about this case from your own memory that you haven't already told me about?
No, sir.
And counsel can help me. Do you intend to offer any expert opinions in this case at all?
I do not intend to offer Ms. Stell as an expert witness for opinion purposes,
Thank you very much.
other than with respect to her own care and treatment, which she's already discussed with you.
Well,
I mean, she's going to talk about her own treatment and care.
All right, let me ask you one other question. With respect to your review of the chart, is there any opinions with respect to how you cared for Mr. Tolson or the reasons why you did certain things for Mr. Tolson that you haven't already told me?
I'm going to object. I don't know how she can
I don't
answer
understand
that.
the question.
She's going to...
Right. What I'm here to find out is, although you're not going to be qualified as an expert in the field of nursing, your lawyer said that you're going to ask to explain the reasons for the care you provided to Mr. Tolson and why. And before I leave today, I want to be sure that we've already covered all of those issues so that I'm not surprised at trial when you say, well, I did this because of this, I did X because of Y, and you haven't told me that today. Do you understand the question? So I want to find out that I know all that before we leave.
Well, I'm going to object. I don't think that it's Ms. Stell's position to know how it is you should ask questions or what it is you should cover. And it's certainly your opportunity to ask Ms. Stell about her assessments and what she did and why she did them now in her deposition.
Okay.
I'm not going to say that there may not be something that she testifies to that is something that happened that you haven't covered today. I don't know that
All right,
That's the situation.
then I'll ask a very broad question, and you can take as much time as you want to answer it, and you can go through every page of the record. I want to know, from reading the record, if you can explain to me all of the assessments, and you may have already done this, but all of the assessments that you made for Mr. Tolson and what you did in light of those assessments. We talked about a lot of stuff for the last 2 hours, but if you want to go through the record and explain that to me, that's fine, but I just want to be sure that I have all those before I leave.
I object. I thought that's what she's been doing, but go ahead.
Well, I don't know if it's all or not because counsel, objected, so I need to be sure that we've thoroughly explored that today.
I'm going to object to the form of your question.
Okay, you can object.
Ms. Stell, if you want to explain the assessment that you did on Mr. Tolson initially, because I don't know that that's been covered, then please do. In detail, as Mr. Gaston has requested.
So if you're asking me how I would assess a patient that came in with this situation that Mr. Tolson had, the patient would, is that what you're asking?
Right, I want you to, if you don't have a specific recollection of what you did, but you do know that you assessed him.
Correct.
Okay? And if your counsel asks you at trial, based upon your habit, training, and experience, for a patient with Mr. Tolson's injuries, what would you have done? That is my question.
Okay.
In this case, what would you have done for Mr. Tolson in light of his presentation when he arrived at the emergency room?
So if a patient that presented like Mr. Tolson, the patient would be brought into the room, the treatment room. I would then walk into the room, ask the patient what he was there for, what he was complaining of, what had happened. In the meantime of doing this, I am assessing the patient as soon as my eyes hit that patient. I'm assessing his neuro assessment. Is he alert? Is he oriented? How does his color look? Is his speech clear? Is he breathing okay? Is he in excruciating pain where he can't even talk to me? So with that said, I would ask the patient why he is here and what happened. At that point, I would take it from there, what the patient said, and do a assessment of him.
Gotcha. Let me hold off 1 second. Is there anywhere in the record where you wrote down, when you asked Mr. Tolson what happened, how he explained how he was injured?
I'm going to object, asked and answered several times, but go ahead. You can answer it again.
No, I did not write that down, no, sir.
Okay. Is that something you normally write down as part of your assessment?
Objection, asked and answered. You can answer it again.
If there was a change from the triage and the patient states he was hurt at work, then no, I would not write anything else down.
Okay. The only thing we have is leg trauma at work. That's the only description from the triage.
There's a description of the incident in the provider paperwork.
Okay, but what I'm asking is, you saw him before the provider saw him,
Correct.
correct? So I'm going to talk about when you asked him what happened.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing we know from the triage, leg trauma at work.
Correct.
Now, did he say leg trauma at work, or do you think he probably told you how his leg was hurt?
Oh, he, I'm sure, told me how it was at work.
Okay.
Do
now,
I document that in detail? No, sir.
Is there a reason why you don't document that in detail, the description of the injury or the mechanism of the injury?
Objection to foundation, you can answer.
That is not in my scope of practice. I discuss the patient as far as treatment as far as nursing care.
I'm sorry, your testimony is, you asked the patient why he's there, you asked the patient what happened, but it's not within your scope of practice to note in the chart his response to those questions.
Objection, that's not what you said.
That's exactly what you said. Is that true?
I discuss why the patient is there with the patient. I did not document why, in explicit detail in the chart, why the patient was there. No.
Is that something that you usually document in the chart, or you never document?
No,
it?
sir.
You never do?
No, sir.
Okay. But if it's different from what's on the triage, it'd be something that you would document, right?
No objection. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
It's not different. He was hurt at work.
But you don't go into any more detail?
No, sir.
Okay.
I did, though. I mean, the patient does go into more detail. It's just not documented.
It's not documented the detail that he went into with you?
Correct.
Okay. Now, continue on. You're talking about, you asked him why he was there, you asked him what happened, you're looking at him, you're listening to his voice, see if his speech is slurred, you make sure he's oriented. Then what's the next thing you do?
I asked the patient why he's here, what his complaint is, and in this situation, it appears that his complaint was knee pain. I then go assess the extremity. I put my hands on his hip, his thigh, his knee, his calf, and his foot. And that is how I came to the conclusion that he needed x-rays. With that assessment, I also am checking the temperature of his leg. I'm looking to make sure that it is pink, it is warm, it's not cold, it's not clammy. I'm checking for pulses and so forth. I'm checking for the patient's appearance of the extremity.
So it looks like you did actually a very detailed physical examination of his leg.
Objection.
Okay. Now, is that detailed examination contained anywhere in the medical chart?
Objection. Asked and answered about 12 times, but you can answer it again.
That's part of nursing assessment, sir. Like, that
Right.
is how I'm evaluating the patient. I'm discussing that with the provider, that if the provider is doing the same thing I'm doing.
But I want to know if this detailed physical examination that you yourself performed is written down anywhere in the chart, the detailed
I'm going
examination.
to object to the use of the terminology physical examination, but you can answer.
No, sir. There is no detailed documentation in the chart.
As part of your physical examination of Mr. Tolson's leg, do you check for range of motion?
Again, objection to foundation.
Yes, I asked the patient if he can move his leg.
Well, you say you actually touch his leg, correct?
Correct.
Do you try to ask him if he could lift his leg up and then try to bend the leg to see what the range of motion is?
I do not if he says that it is painful,
Do you know whether or not,
or if he cannot do it himself.
do you know one way or the other, whether he was able to do it itself or whether you assisted him with it?
I don't remember.
Objection. Ms. Carter, go ahead.
Now, do you also check for instability in the knee?
I don't understand your question.
Okay. When you believe a patient has a knee injury, you understand that there are ligaments, tendons, and muscles that help to stabilize the knee, correct?
Correct.
And part of your orthopedic examination is to see whether or not, if you can, from a physical examination, determine if there's any instability or injury to the ligaments, muscles, or tendons, correct?
Objection to foundation and use of the terminology incorrectly.
That's outside of my scope of practice.
Okay. What's the purpose for examining his knee?
Objection to
What would be
foundation.
your purpose for examining his knee?
Objection to foundation
You
terminology.
can answer. The lawyer can't help you. You can answer.
I don't understand the question.
Okay. Why did you examine his knee?
For the need for x-rays.
To determine if there was an injury, correct?
Correct.
Objection.
Now, not just if there was a fracture, but if there was other traumatic injury to the knee, correct?
Objection. Ms.
If
Stowe
you're
has
gonna-
already...
you have to, if you're going to put a speaking objection, the lady has to leave.
Okay, then Ms. Stowe, could you please step outside? Yeah, you have to take off the microphone.
Don't strangle yourself.
Yeah, don't do that.
And I've made a little obstacle course back here, so be careful. Okay, the reason for my objection and use of the terminology objection is because you are repeatedly asking her questions about physical examination, and now you are going towards diagnosis and the ordering of tests and for determination of diagnosis, all of which is outside the scope of practice for a registered nurse. She's told you that in her testimony so far, several times as a matter of fact. When you were asking her other questions, she said that's outside of my scope. What she has testified to is how she performed a nursing assessment, not a physical examination. And so you're questioning now, about traumatic injury or what you're looking for with x-rays is all outside the scope of her nursing practice. And if you continue to ask it that way, I'm going to have to instruct her not to answer.
I disagree. The witness said under direct examination that she put her hands on his leg. She checked for pulses. She checked for temperature. She did a physical examination. Now, whether you want to qualify that as physical examination or not, she physically touched the man's knee and leg, and I want to ask her why and what the purpose of. So
She
that's why I'm asking.
testified
That's
to
why I'm asking
doing a
the
nursing
questions.
assessment and how
Yeah.
she performed it on his leg,
Right.
which, yes, included touching his
Right.
leg and feeling the temperature and checking the pulse. If you want to ask her why she checked his pulse or felt his leg, that's fine, but I am not going to permit her to answer questions that go to why she performed a physical examination, because that is not what she did, or why she ordered certain things. She's already testified that she is allowed to order x-rays to facilitate the process, not for any other purpose. So if you're going to go towards medical diagnosis or things outside the scope of nursing practice, I'm going to tell her not to answer.
And you can do that. That's your prerogative. We'll ask her to come back in, and I'll continue asking the questions.
Thank you, Bob. I'm sorry for that.
Okay.
Thank you for stepping out.
Are we still on the video? We never went off. Okay. Ma'am, I'm going to ask you, was the purpose for your physical assessment of Mr. Tolson's knee to try to figure out if he sustained an injury to his knee?
Correct.
Now, injuries to the knee can take a variety of forms. Could be a broken knee, fracture, dislocation, injuries to internal structures such as ligaments, and actually blood vessels. Would you agree with that?
Objection.
I'm sorry, I don't remember the beginning of the question.
Okay. Injuries to a person's knee can
yes.
include everything that I just said.
Yes, sir.
Now, And in order to do a physical assessment of a patient to determine if there's some internal injury to the structures, were you taught that you can try to do an examination of the leg to test stability within a knee? Have you been instructed in that type of a assessment?
I'm going to object to the extent that this is going to medical practice, not nursing practice, but
Correct.
outside of that you can answer.
I'm taught to assess if there is injury,
Okay.
to assess if there is a need for x-ray. That is my purpose of assessing at that particular time.
Okay. So we have an assessment for injury, assessment for x-ray, also an assessment to determine whether a Doppler study would be appropriate, correct?
Objection.
It is outside of my scope of practice to order a Doppler study, a venous Doppler study.
No, I'm talking about a handheld Doppler examination to check for pulse in the room. You can do that, right?
Correct. I stated that if
Right.
I did not feel a pulse.
Right. That's what I mean by Doppler study.
Okay, I'm
I didn't
sorry.
mean a venous Doppler. I mean
Okay.
the Doppler study that you do at the bedside. So one of the purposes of the examination is to determine whether you need to do a bedside Doppler examination, correct?
Objection, again, to the use of the term examination, and she's asked and answered that question several times.
You can answer.
I am not assessing the knee for the need to use a Doppler study. I'm assessing the knee for injury, for pain, for sensation, for color, for temperature. That's why I'm placing my hands on that knee and assessing it.
Well, do you do the pulse check to determine if there's adequate blood flow to the leg?
To make sure that there's vascularity intact, yes.
Right. And if you find that there's not, then you can go to the bedside Doppler.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Now, if you find instability in the knee when you conduct the assessment, do you bring that to the attention of the provider, either the physician's assistant or the doctor?
Objection to foundation, and I'm going to instruct you not to answer that question because it's a medical-based question.
What do you do? Have you found in your assessments patients who have had instability in their knee?
Objection, you can answer that one.
I discuss what my findings with the providers, yes.
That's what I mean. So if you, after your assessment of the patient, reach a conclusion in your own mind that the patient has instability in the knee, then you would discuss your findings with the physician assistant or the doctor, correct?
Objection to foundation.
I would document any abnormal findings in the chart and discuss it with the provider, yes.
And what are some of the tests, if you're aware, that you use in your practice in order to assess instability in a knee?
Objection. Objection, I'm going to instruct you not to answer that question.
You do an assessment to determine if there's instability in a patient's knee who has presented with a situation like Mr. Tolson, correct?
Objection to foundation.
Is that correct?
I assess patients with injury to knees, yes.
Which includes an assessment of the stability or lack thereof in the knee.
Objection to foundation.
You can answer.
The stability is what is catching me, because I assess for pain. Like I've said, I assess for pain, I assess temperature, I assess for deformity, I assess for injury, I assess for color, temperature, and so forth.
Okay, maybe we're talking apples and oranges.
Are you still answering this still? I just couldn't tell if you had finished. Okay.
When you assess for injury, we talked about the various type of injuries, the fracture, the dislocation, injuries to the internal structures, correct?
Correct.
Okay. When you do that type of assessment, can you tell me what you do in order to assess for the injury, such as internal structure of the knee, whether it's a ligament, a muscle, or tendon? How do you do that?
Objection. Foundation. Go ahead.
I cannot. I don't have x-ray vision. I assess, again, for pain, for color, for temperature, for deformity, I assess for that. I assess for abnormal presentation. That's my assessment.
That's your assessment, okay. All right. And is that the type of assessment that you believed in accordance with your practice that you performed on Mr. Tolson?
Correct.
Okay. And as a result of that assessment, you ordered an X-ray, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Is that believe you were concerned about fracture or dislocation?
I was concerned because the patient was complaining of knee pain. I then, at that point, felt it necessary to do an X-ray of his knee because of the injury, him stating that the door fell on his knee or leg. I also felt the need for a hip X-ray, a femur X-ray, a tib-fib X-ray, and an ankle X-ray.
Okay. When you say him stating the door fell on his knee or leg, that's from something else that was in the chart, not from your recollection of what he told you, correct?
I am basing, yes, on what was stated in the chart. At that time, I'm assuming he told me.
Okay, you can't assume.
Oh.
You can't assume. You just
In my
got-
practice, if a patient complains of a door falling on his leg, I am going to assess all the surrounding joints of that injury.
It looks like the reason for the administration of the lauded is because he had pain in the back of his knee. Did you see that in the chart?
What page are you looking at?
Page 21.
Can you say where on page 21? My copy's very poor.
Reason for exam, I'm sorry, maybe I misspoke. On page 21, it says, maybe this is your request for X-ray, so let's go through that. I want to be sure we have accurate. Which side is requested? Left. Would that refer to the radiology studies of the left side of his leg, the left leg?
Yes.
Reason for the exam, does that say trauma, back of knee pain? Would that be correct?
I can't read it. I see the word trauma and knee pain, back of,
Yeah, back
I
of...
don't know if it's back or knee pain. I can't read it clearly.
See if that copy's any better.
To me, that looks like back of knee pain, yes.
Okay. All right, so from that record, would it be fair to say that from your assessment of Mr. Tolson's leg, you determined that he had complained of pain in the back of his knee?
Objection. There's been no testimony that this was her record.
Oh.
I can't, I don't know.
Okay. And who would have, you ordered the request for the x-rays, correct?
It appears that I assessed him for the need of x-rays, but on this, it says that Anita Weiss actually ordered the x-rays. That could mean that I asked her to put them in, those specific x-rays, or it could mean that I used her computer to put them in. I do not remember.
Okay, but you have no reason to believe that that statement is false, do you?
Objection.
object.
She's just testified she doesn't know what
don't
this
know.
record is.
You don't know one way or the other?
No, I do not.
Okay. And who would type in the reason for exam trauma back of knee pain? Who would it have to come from?
If you know.
You know, who would have to type that in the computer? It would have to be one of Mr. Tolson's providers or a nurse who did the assessment.
Objection.
Would that be a fair statement?
Objection. Ms. Stowe, we don't want you guessing or speculating. If you know, you can answer. If you don't
I do not know.
Don't answer.
You do not know. Okay. And did anyone else examine Mr. Tolson before you made the request for x-ray studies?
I do not know.
When was the request for x-ray studies made? What time?
At 15:27.
Okay. According to the chart, can you find anywhere in the record where someone else examined him other than you and the triage nurse before 15:27? Actually examined or did an assessment of Mr. Tolson's leg?
Thank you.
I don't think so, no.
Okay, all right. All right, have we went through what you believed was your assessment of Mr. Tolson's leg?
I believe that I said everything.
Okay,
of
I
how
just want to be
assessed
sure.
him.
I just want to be
believe
sure.
so.
Okay, all right. All right.
I don't know where we left off. We kind of went off.
We left
on a
off that
tangent.
you were touching his leg, put your hands on his leg, feeling for pulse, color, temperature, things like that.
Cap refill.
What's a cap refill?
A cap refill is when you touch the patient's leg and the blood returns back,
Okay. And again,
or skin, rather.
right, and there's just no indication in the chart that it wasn't documented, is that true?
Well, this is charting by exception, so there was no deviation from normal. So that says that the patient had a normal cap refill.
I don't understand the term charting by exception. Can you explain that to me?
Charting by exception is documenting deviation from normal in a chart.
Well, if there was a deviation from the normal in the chart, would you then have to document that?
Repeat the question?
You said that this is documentation by exception, correct? Okay. Now, so if there was an exception to normal, then that should have been documented in the chart?
If there was something abnormal in the assessment, then that is when it is to be documented.
Okay. But you didn't document in the chart any abnormal assessment findings, did you?
No, because there was no change in the initial assessment.
Well, what is the abnormal findings that you found in his knee that caused you to order an x-ray of his knee?
Objection. She's testified about this.
You can answer.
That there was a swelling and pain.
And was he also unable to bend his left knee?
Objection.
I don't know. I can't answer that.
Okay. Have we now finished your entire assessment of Mr. Tolson? The initial assessment?
I believe so.
Okay. And other than what you already told me, did you do any other assessments of Mr. Tolson? Other than what you already testified to?
I assess patients the whole time they're in my care. I can't tell you unless you ask me a specific question.
All right. How many other times did you assess him while he was in your care?
Objection. Just asked and answered. Go ahead.
Like I said, I initially assessed him. I'm always looking at the patient. If I'm in the room, I'm assessing them.
I'm talking about a hands-on physical assessment. Other than the one you talked about just now and the ones you spoke about earlier, is there any other
So the
hands-on?
initial, I'm sorry.
Is there any other hands-on assessment of his leg that you haven't discussed already?
I believe I have discussed the initial assessment and the discharge assessment,
Okay.
and that's all.
And that's all the physical assessments, hands-on, that you believe you performed on Mr. Tolson while he was in the emergency room?
That I can speak of.
Is there anyone else who signed any portion of Mr. Tolson's chart that we haven't talked about? And we can include Dr. Shaw and Dr. Jackson.
I'm sorry, Rodney, I missed that question.
Is there anyone else that we haven't identified who may have placed a note in Mr. Mr. Tolson's chart other than what you already told us, including Dr. Shaw I'm sorry, PA Shaw and Dr. Jackson?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. It's, is Anita Weiss still employed at the hospital?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you. And Ms. Craddock still employed at the hospital?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you. And you still work there, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thanks. Okay. Council have any
I
questions?
just have
in
a
light of
couple
that?
of questions. Either during your assessments of Mr. Tolson or at discharge, had his leg been cold, or he complained of cold leg, or discolor of his leg? Would you have noted that?
Yes, sir. I would have documented that if there was any change.
Okay. And based upon your practice, when you discharge a patient, you indicate you put hands on and assess the patient from a neurovascular standpoint, correct?
Yes, sir.
Do you ask him how he's feeling?
Yes, sir.
And if Mr. Tolson had told you he still had numbness or paresthesia in his leg, would you have noted that upon your discharge examination of him?
I would have documented that in the chart and also discussed it with the provider.
Okay. And I take it he did not tell you that upon
Correct.
discharge? During your assessment or at discharge, is there any doubt in your mind as you sit here today that Mr. Tolson had positive pulses in his left leg?
I'm positive, due to the documentation, that there was positive pulses in his distal pulses.
Okay. Thank you so much. Yeah.
I'm just looking, one sec. Ms. Stowe, can you turn to page 16 in the record before you? Is there a time on that page as to when the Toradol was ordered?
It looks like 6:45. Or, I'm sorry.
6:45?
I have a very bad copy here.
Okay. It's the time written to the left?
To the left, whatever
Okay.
that time states.
Okay.
Maybe a 4:45, it looks.
You did not order the Toradol, correct? Or any of the medications?
That's outside of my scope of practice. I just administer medicines, I do not order.
I think that's all my questions, thank you.
Just a couple follow-up. Ma'am, I think we've already established that you cannot recall any specific conversations between Mr. Tolson and yourself that occurred in the emergency room on December 3rd, 2009. Would that be correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Also, if a patient presents with a cool or cold foot, would you agree that that is a potentially dangerous medical condition?
Objection.
No,
That's, don't answer that question.
You-
I'm instructing her not to answer that
Not to answer,
question.
not to answer the question. If you had a cold foot, what would you have done? If Mr. Tolson or his family members told you, my foot's cold or cool, what would...
Did you lose your mic?
I did.
Is that it?
Hang on a second.
That's the best thing happening in this deposition?
I'm confident he would have been heard anyway.
Yeah, I'm confident of that.
If Mr. Tolson or his family had told you upon discharge that his foot was cool or cold, what would you, as the discharge nurse, be required to do?
Objection to the foundation.
If I had heard from the patient that the patient was complaining of a cold foot, I would have documented it and told the provider immediately.
Okay. You would not have let him be discharged from the hospital, correct?
Absolutely not.
And if the patient's family had conveyed that to you, would you have done the same thing?
Correct.
Okay. And if at any time during your assessment of Mr. Tolson, you believed he had a cool or cold foot, you'd do the same thing, bring it to the attention of the provider?
And documented as well, yes.
Document. Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
I have no follow-up questions. Thank you.
I have nothing on it. Thank you.
Here marks the end of Volume 1, tape number 1 in the deposition of Caroline Stell. Going off the record, the time is 3:52 p.m.
We will.